We're going to be talking about life apps for these 6 weeks, 5 weeks past today, and most of you know what that is. I think now there are actually more people with smartphones than they are with those other phones. We won't call them dumb phones, but most of us know what an app is. An app is an application, and I think we have a website here. Yeah, Jeff's already doing that, and there are just literally now millions of applications. Most of them are free, and you can go there and do anything, get an application for anything you want. You know, as a matter of fact, some of us are kind of slightly addicted to the applications, and you look in our, in our phones, and we just got hundreds of applications that just suck our memory down all the time, and every day you have to look about how they've been renewed. But if you're a runner, it can tell you how far you run and how fast you run. You can post that on Facebook so everybody can be impressed with that. Or if you're a dieter, you can do that and then post that on Facebook, and people can see how much weight you've lost and all that kind of junk. But you know what apps are, okay? The thing is that just having the app doesn't do you any good. You got to use the app, right? Got apps for all kinds of things. I'm always amazed that I look at my phone and go, wow, I didn't realize downloading that. I've never used that. That maybe could be something, but it doesn't do any good unless you use the application just to know things or say things. What matters, and this is what we're talking about today, is application, is actually doing it. And we'll look at 5 specific applications that God gives those who follow Him and want to receive what He has for us. Because if you just talk about them, it doesn't do any good. I mean, you've got to do it. And you may, it doesn't make any difference really how smart you are. You can't expect to enjoy what God has for you unless you do more than just listen to it. You've got to do it. Doing makes all the difference. That's what you're going to hear over and over today for 20 minutes, is that doing makes all the difference. And if we think that we can just know something and agree with that, or have this philosophy, or say, yeah, that's my belief system, and do nothing about it, then we know that we're never going to get those promises. Now, the 5 applications we're going to talk about beginning next week are for people who are really in covenant with God and trying to follow Jesus Christ. Normally we call them Christians. I kind of am trying to get away from that term Christian because it sounds like, again, something that we did years ago, not something that we're necessarily doing now. So I talk more about like following Christ. But the church often tries to get everyone else to do these things. And these things we're going to be talking about is just really for people that are trying to follow Christ and believe in Jesus Christ. But it's kind of weird because we want everybody else to do the same thing too. God gives some very specific instructions about, how we're to live, about what will bring us joy, what will bring us a good life. And the church does some strange things because we try to make everybody else do the same thing. So as we go through these 5 things, we'll notice that these are some very exceptional words that seem almost foreign to our world, and that's because they're not given to the world, but they're given to the church. They're given to Christians and to God's followers who are seeking Him, who want to live a life that pleases God. And God's commandments are given to people who are already in covenant to Him. You may not know that. A lot of people, we don't talk about this in the church much, but the 10 Commandments were not given to the world. They were given to the Hebrew people who were there with Moses at the foot of Mount Sinai, and God gave those covenant to them. They had those commandments, they had a special covenant with Him, right? And so these 10 commandments were God says these are the things, there's some other things too, but these are the things that you're going to do if you're going to be in covenant with me, and I'm going to protect you and take care of you and give you this land, and you're to do these 10 things, plus there's some others. He goes on. But He didn't say, well, now here's 10 commandments, and I want you to make sure that everybody else does these things. So we get this kind of messed up sometimes. We think, well, the 10 commandments, they're from God, so my neighbors should be doing them too, right? So we want to make sure that everybody out there who maybe they're not really trying like we're trying, and they're not following God, they're not following Christ, they don't really care, and yet we try to make these commandments their commandments too. And then like when they don't do them right, we go, see, that's why I'm a Christian, because I can keep those and you're not doing them very well, but I'm doing them really well. So, it's strange how we go about doing that. I mean, American Christianity oftentimes tries to impose the promises and the commandments that we get on everybody. And some people, I'm not I love the Ten Commandments and we should be keeping the Ten Commandments, but I don't think that we should just post them everywhere for everybody to see and say, see, you're supposed to be doing those things, world, because they're not for the world. They're for people who are following Christ. And we're going, well, like, you should be doing them. And they're going like, well, so what? We don't really care about that stuff. And the church sometimes gets really messed up, really because they don't understand the Bible, and we misuse it. And we take the guidelines, we take the laws that are found in the Bible, and we look at our neighbor who doesn't go to church, doesn't love Jesus, doesn't care anything about him. We go, man, you should be doing these things that we're doing. We notice the way you've been raising your kids, and it says in the Bible that you're supposed to bring your kids up, to follow the Lord. And I notice that you're not doing that. And don't you really feel bad about that, neighbor, because you're not bringing your kids up to follow the Lord? And the neighbor says, I don't care. Well, what are you doing getting in my yard? What are you doing talking to me about the way that I'm raising my kids? Go, well, man, you should be doing that because that's what it says in the Bible. And he says, it's not my Bible. I don't care. It's not my God. He said, well, shouldn't you feel bad about this? And then what we do is we go back home. We go, man, I just preached the gospel to the neighbor. He didn't take it real well, but I know he heard it. Boy, I told him how he's messing up his kids, and he wasn't raising them in the Lord, and it's just a matter of time before he comes to Jesus. And the church has done that for centuries, and American Christianity is really worse about this than other nations are. And we go, we can't figure out why people don't like the church. It's just really strange to us why they are not just flocking into the church, because we preached the gospel to them. We told them what they should be doing. We tried to give them these laws that were given to us, but we try to give them to them, and then we can't figure out why they're saying that we judge people all the time. We don't judge people. We just enlighten people. We just give them the truth. It's weird. Maybe you've had that experience where somebody's tried to make you feel bad because you're not doing what they say that you should do. Maybe it took you years before you could kind of soften up a little bit and say, maybe not all the church is bad. Maybe there are some people there that, understand this. The New Testament says clearly that insiders, people who follow Jesus Christ, are not supposed to judge people who are on the outside. It says that so clearly. I mean, we're not supposed to put our law on them, our guidelines on them, our covenant stuff on them. And, instead, often that's what we do. And as a matter of fact, what it says is that we're supposed to kind of judge the insiders. We're supposed to be looking at each other and going, man, what you did there, I think the Bible says you're not supposed to do that. It says judgment begins with the church, not with the world. God will take care of judging the world. It's the insiders, the people that are trying to follow the Lord. For some reason, the church has become really good at showing people who don't even claim to be following God that they're really messing things up and they're in big trouble. And that just isn't in our place. It'd be kind of like, I go over to Arby's over here occasionally and get a sandwich. Just walk over there and get a sandwich. What if I walked over to Arby's and stand behind the counter and, their floor is a mess. Gee. Although this is pretty clean, Arby's, but the floor is a mess. And so I just go around the counter. I go, hey there, Bob, have you looked at the floor? There's stuff all over the floor. Go, well, yeah, there's stuff. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I want you to come in a half an hour early. I'm going to give you a second chance, Bob. I want you to come in tomorrow a half an hour early and clean this floor up. And he'd go, who is that guy? Is that Don Arby? Does he have some kind of strange authority over me? I said, no. It's none of my business, right? So why is it my business? And see, I got to preach this to myself all the time because I see stuff that happens in the world and it just goes, what's wrong with this world? It acts like it's lost. Well, it is. They're not following God's rules. And I try to impose God's law on them. I don't have any authority to do that. Only God has that authority to do that, right? And all that's to set up this topic for today, which is about application. It doesn't matter what we say or intend if we don't follow through. And there are two people in the New Testament really have a lot to say about them. One of them is Jesus, and I think we'll get to the passage that he has at the end of the message. But the first one is his brother, James. Jesus has a half-brother named James, and James doesn't follow Jesus when Jesus is doing his ministry. And I think that's understandable. I mean, really, he's your brother. Can you imagine having your brother or sister come to you and go, I am the Son of God? Well, that's just not, you're going to go, you're what? You're my brother. You're the Son of God. So you can imagine, I think we ought to let James off here, that he doesn't fall in line with everybody else. But after the resurrection, Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 15 that Jesus comes to James after the resurrection. He makes a special visit to him, and James believes, and James becomes the leader of the Jerusalem church. And so James has some stuff that he says about this, and it's from James 1, beginning with the 22nd verse. He says, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves." Now, they had the same kind of situation that we have here this morning. Although they didn't have Bibles, they couldn't watch a preacher on TV. The only way they listened to the Word, the only way they received the Word was to be in the fellowship with the other Christians. They had no Bible at that time, so there was preaching, and they would receive what eventually turned into the Bible. But this is just so relevant. He says, don't merely or only listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. So what's going on then in their church fellowships or synagogue, as the church came out of the synagogue, still happens today in our services. And people now and then, they think, if I'm in the building, I get credit. I should get credit because I'm at worship. And I got up, and it was the Sunday after Easter, and I went last week, and I should get credit today because I know the attendance is going to be low. There's going to be a lot of people who aren't there on the Sunday after Easter, and yet I'm there, and I'm in the building. So I should get some credit for this. And so I'm going to hear the word, merely hear the word, is what's going to happen. And, he thinks, well, God should give me some credit for this. God looks at me and goes, man, I can't believe he made it. He was up late last night and the game was long and he had a busy day and he was outside and he's really tired. And yet he got up on Sunday morning after Easter and he came to worship, and here he is with everybody else and he's paying attention most of the time. There's some times when he's drifting off, but somebody write this down, because he's really trying, and he should get credit. He's in the building this morning. And so, this week, maybe tomorrow when he's late and he's going to work, and he's going to hit all the lights. That's what I'm going to do for him. He's going to get credit. He's going to hit all the lights going to work, or she was there, and so she's going to get the treadmill by the cute guy. That's what I'm going to do for her. Everybody should get credit, right? For being in the building, for showing up. Wow. Then they think that, these people, I'm talking about James's time, that they endure the sermon. They hear it. They hear the sermon. They're enduring the thing. So then, they should get super points. And if they actually feel guilty while things are going on, man, they should even get more points. We got this strange thing that we do in American Christianity, that if somebody if the pastor's really bringing the word, and everybody, got really quiet in there. Man, he was hitting us all. Wow, he really brought it. He laid it on today. It was great. Everybody just felt rotten. Everybody was feeling really bad about themselves at worship today. Got this strange thing that goes on in Christianity. We equate feeling guilty in worship with having a spiritual experience. Did you ever think about that? I went to worship and I really felt bad. Man, he really got my stuff. And then I felt real bad and I prayed to Jesus and I said, sorry, Jesus. And he says, please don't do it again, but I know I'm going to do it again. I come back next week and it's the same thing over and over. We have two kinds of really sick religious experiences in American Christianity. Is that as I feel really bad about myself, and the other is I get goosebumps, right? And they're like the two extremes, and we think that's what it is to be a Christian. James says, you just hear it, and you don't do anything about it. Sick cycle of ignoring anything that God says for 6 days and then going to church again and feeling super bad and saying, I'm sorry, silently to God over and over during the prayer, and then going out and doing the exact same thing again so I can feel guilty again and say, I'm sorry, and go, he was so real today. He was close to me. James goes on. Got really quiet on that, didn't it? James goes on, verse 22. He says, do what it says. They're like, do it? What do you mean, do it? If I do it, then I won't feel guilty next Sunday. And where will my religious experience go to if I don't feel guilty next Sunday? What do you mean, do it? Just hear it. Okay, that's a religious experience. I sin, he forgives. It's just this great arrangement. What will Jesus do if he doesn't have me to forgive? We got this kind of enabling relationship where I do the sinning, he does the forgiving. If things are working fine, why change anything and do what he says to do? James says, you guys aren't fooling anyone but yourselves. You're just listening and not doing. You're deceiving yourselves. No, wow. You think it's about hearing. It isn't about hearing. It's about doing. Hearing's just the first part. First we have to hear, then we have to do it. The most important part is that you do what it says. Then he gives this illustration that, man, this is just so 21st century. He says it's like looking in the mirror in the morning. Look, verse 23, he says, those who listen to the word but do not do what it says are like people who look at their faces in a mirror, and after looking at themselves, they go away and immediately forget what they look like. Now, in their day, they didn't have mirrors like we do. Whoever builds our houses builds them for young people. There's no doubt about it. Because our bathrooms are just filled with mirrors. You'll get what I mean when you get older, all right? You walk into your bathroom in the morning, and the whole wall's filled with mirrors, and you go, You can kind of imagine. No, you don't want to imagine. But you know what I mean. They didn't have those kind of mirrors. They had maybe some polished metal. And really, probably the way that they looked at themselves more often than not was a bowl of water that they would see the reflection in. And they would look at themselves in that. And, we even have ladies have those super mirrors with lights around them and magnifying glasses. It's like, oh, wow, that's just... Ooh. There's no way, it's bad enough to walk in the morning and go, oh, but your eyes can hardly see anyway. And he says, when you come to worship and you listen, but you don't do anything about it, it's like walking into the bathroom in the morning and looking at yourself in the mirror and going, well, I think that's okay, and going to work. Can you imagine if we just... Not all you beautiful people, but some of us that are a little more crusty, if we walked in and with this hair, less hair you have, right, guys, the worse it is to take care of. Some of you have just gone all the way, but, it's like, you go in the morning and go, whoa, what are we going to do with that? I can't even, and then I'm just going to go to work. Just going to go out like that? He says that's what it's like. You go to worship and God gives you a word and then you go, no, I think I'm okay the way I am. He says, it's just like looking in a mirror. You get the picture. What if you just got up in the morning and took one look in the mirror and then just did nothing about it? So I think I'm okay. I think I look pretty good the way it is. That'd be interesting. There'd be some talk. The Christians would say, oh, we really need to pray for Don. Something's wrong. Someone might say, man, something wrong. You've been working, you need to clean up. And I'd say, oh, no, I'm fine. I know what things look like, but I'm cool just the way you guys could go pray for me over there. You could pray for my family to have the strength to endure the way I look. But I don't really need to shave or comb my hair. I'm fine just like this, really, James says that when we hear that and we don't do what the Word says, we're just like that. It's really silly, isn't it? It's a good illustration. That actually happened to me not too awful long ago. Lots of times on Saturdays I don't shave. That's no big deal. Men hate shaving. But it was Saturday and it was back in the fall. And I got up one Saturday morning and looked in the mirror like usual and got depressed and went downstairs. And, I put some work clothes on. I was working on some furniture, went down, got a cup of coffee, ate a little bit of breakfast, and got in my truck and went to Lowe's. No hat. Nothing. I came back and Nina was there and I said, honey, I just went to Lowe's like this. I got back and I hadn't realized that I'd left the house the way I'd gotten up in the morning. And my hair was going every which way and there was stuff on my face, And I actually did that. I actually went out into public like that and nobody knew. I didn't see anybody I knew, but I'm sure people were looking at me and going, oh, wow, he's driving here. I feel so sorry for his family. James says, when you hear God's word for you and you don't do anything about it, you're like Don on Saturday mornings, is what he says. He says, people wonder if you have any sense at all. You're just wandering around out in public like you don't care. And that's James's illustration. And do you know what we do in the church? Usually, we do nothing about it. Don shows up at Bible study like that, and he hasn't looked in the mirror all day, and he's a mess. And finally, someone says, Don, you growing a beard, man? You kind of look like you haven't shaved today. And been working outside all day, and man, what's going on? And Don says, oh, wow, I thought about shaving. I studied shaving. I looked at a YouTube video on shaving. I went to a shaving conference. I've read a lot of books and articles. I Googled shaving, and I know everything there is about shaving, but I don't really think I'm ready to shave yet. I think I'm just going to look like this, okay? And we in the church would gather around and say, let's lift up Brother Don to the Lord, right? Instead of saying, Don, go shave. Right? And we say, well, at least Don's honest about it and authentic about it. At least he knows he looks bad. He doesn't care. At least he's being honest with us that he doesn't care. And listen, authenticity and honesty are very important, but if we're not doing it, see, we're missing it. That's the most important thing. James says, just do it. The Nike commercial was formed right there. Nike got that from James. Just do it. You heard it, now go do it. Application, he says, is everything. Then he goes on with verse 25. He says, but those who look at the mirror, look intently into the perfect law, but those who look intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continue it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. I botched that. I'm sorry. Look intently into the perfect law that gives freedom. Those two things join together. Very seldom do we see law and freedom joined together here. We think anything that's got to do with law is taking something away from us. We don't think it has anything to do with freedom. And James joins these two together. And this is one reason why we aren't doing what we heard from God. Because we think if we do what God wants us to do, when he gives us a word, that we think, man, I'm going to lose something. Life's going to I've got this whole thing all figured out pretty good, and God gets in it, he's going to mess in it, and then I'm going to lose something. Somebody's going to take something away from me. James says that when we look intently, and that means that we stare at it until we get it. When we look into the law, okay? And we get it, that we'll be blessed. And this is one of the most misunderstood truths, I think, about God's design, that law or guidelines, God's instruction for us gives us freedom, gives us liberty. It doesn't take things away. See, we've been told that when we have no boundaries, when we can just do what we want to do and do what we feel like doing, that is what we're really aiming for. That's great freedom. And James says, no, it's when we look at the law and really understand what God wants for us, that's where we find our freedom. And this is the difficult part here is that the freedom is always delayed. It's just kind of flipped. You know, the world promises us freedom and we get it right now. And it's later that the bondage comes. And God says, no, you know, the bondage, the freedom doesn't happen right now. You start following my guidelines and slowly the freedom comes. I just think of a couple of things like money is an easy example for us to look at. You know, and God says, listen, here's my guidelines for you with money. I want you to give some to me. And you should save some. The rest of it, it's yours. Just, you know, have fun with it. Don't be a miser with it. Just have fun with it. And the world says, oh man, you know, spend what's yours and spend some more. Right? Well, why wait? Why wait to have what you want now? Because you may never get to that day. So just borrow all you can borrow. And just get what you need, what you want right now. And, you know, God's guidelines are no. You know, be content with what you have now. That old broken down couch that looks nasty and the lady next door, she got a new one. Well, you like yours. Because hers isn't paid for, but yours is paid for. And he says, like that old broken down couch. Be content with that. And you'll find out that in time, as you put God's guidelines to good use, that in time that you'll have such freedom. Because you won't owe anybody any money. And you find that out later. Or I think the other one is that presents itself as sex. You know, God's word says sexual intimacy is a gift by God that's given for a man and a woman into a marriage relationship. Now, when you're 16, that's a pretty rough thing to hear. When you're 22, it's a pretty rough thing to hear. You know, but we find out that if we do what God tells us to do, that later on, we get the greatest joy in life. Because you see, that intimacy is just so intense for two committed people together. But if we do the other and, you know, and just do what we want to do or what we feel like doing whenever we want to do it, we find out that later on there's great bondage there. That we're carrying a lot of junk with us. So it never comes today. The freedom is always later when we follow his guidelines. And we've got to remember that. We think long term, we live long term. Now, let me come to the close on this. I want to give you what Jesus says. He gave a great teaching. It's in Matthew 7, 24 to 27. It's at the end of the Sermon on the Mount where he tells us a lot of stuff on how to live. And then he closes with this statement. He says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it has its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. That's pretty simple stuff, really. We don't have to be, real smart to figure that one out. Jesus says really the same thing that he says, that his brother James says. He says, don't just hear it, do it. You've heard these words. Now do something about it. It's all about application. And he uses this illustration of two houses. One's built on sand, one's built on rock. When Luke gives this parable, he says, dig down to the rock. You know, it's a lot harder to build a house on rock than it is on sand. I mean, we'd much rather dig a hole in sand, right, than to dig a hole down and get to the bedrock. And yet we know that the foundation of a house is the most important thing. And Jesus is equating our foundation in life with our willingness to do the hard thing, which is to dig down to the rock and to build on something that's solid. And he says it's never going to be easy, you know. It's not that you do the easy thing. Sometimes you have to do the most difficult thing, but it gets easier as time goes by. And the other way around is you do the easy thing now and it gets more difficult later. He says, but building on rock is the only way to do it, and it's going to take some effort. It's all about hearing and doing, application. It really doesn't matter if we hear it and we don't do it. It doesn't matter what we intend to do. It doesn't matter what our neighbors or our friends do. Being sorry is not what he says. He says it's not the same thing just to be sorry. You don't just want to live a sorry life. You want to live a life that gives you freedom with what God intends. The freedom that God wants to give us can only come through our willingness to do what he says. And everything else is bondage. Well, I made that sound really simple, didn't I? Just go do it. We know it's more complicated than that. And we'll be talking about that for the next 5 weeks, as how God empowers us to actually have application to do what he says. But here we learn that it is about doing it. The next 5 weeks, each one is vital to our lives. These applications are for anyone who wants to follow Jesus Christ and want to receive from him the covenant blessings. And let's just sit for a moment in prayer with this while we prepare to continue on with worship.
And all who are thirsty, all who are weak, come to the fountain, dip your heart in the streams of life, let the pain and the sorrow be washed away in the waves of his mercy, as deep cries out.